So this is a special birth story edition, which has no association with the floss tube, with the yarnivore, with the book reading. It has no association with anything. It is just the story of how my son came to be. And Sassy is here to say hello. I'm not going to lift her up though, because then she'll squeal. And that is almost the end of the coffee. The bub is bubbing. And I call him the bub. So there you go. Starting at the start, it was New Year's Eve. And we had fun. I made my husband a cheese plate. We played Ticket to Ride. We had pavlovas, which we made for the first time, and they turned out okay. We stayed up, went to bed shortly after New Year's Eve. The first of the month, I woke up with kind of a headache. I took some Tylenol, because you can take Tylenol when you're pregnant. Kind of did my own thing, wandered about. It didn't really go away. And then it wasn't too bad, so I figured whatever. We had gone to bed, and I woke up probably around midnight. We'd gone to bed at 11, so I hadn't slept very much, but I wasn't sleeping much anyway. I was peeing every 3 seconds, it felt like, because, you know, he was so low. He was sitting on my bladder. And I went to pee. I was feeling super nauseous. My migraine, the headache had proceeded into a migraine, and it was getting worse and worse. So I took some more Tylenol, and I grabbed some ice packs, and I laid on the couch because I was pretty sure I was going to puke. I had like a little bucket, and I was like, okay, I'll see if I can just sleep this one out, because I'm prone to migraines. That's normal for me. And it wouldn't go away. And then my husband's alarm went off to go to work, and those start ringing at about 5 o'clock in the morning. They used to. Now they start at 4 because he has to start an hour earlier. But I digress. So at about 5 o'clock they started to go off, and I was like, nope, nope, can't do it anymore. I am friggin' done. So I went and woke him up and said, listen, we've got to do something about this. And he was like, okay, well, do we go to urgent care? And I said, urgent care is not going to do shit for me. We are going to have to go to the hospital, because that's the only place that they will stick an IV in you and give you what I need. Plus they're going to have to monitor the baby probably. So let's go to the emergency room and get me some whatever. I assumed morphine at this point, and yeah. He's like, you always, like always, first thing in the morning after a long weekend, like the guys think that I'm so full of crap. I was like, I don't care if the guys think you're full of crap. We're going to the emergency room. So off we went to the emergency room, and I was like trying not to puke the entire drive, which is about 20 minutes from here. And I got in, I said to the person, you know, I'm having a migraine. I need something for this migraine. I can't handle it. It is way too strong. I feel like I'm gonna vomit. By the way, I'm 36 and a half weeks pregnant. Once you say you're 36 and a half weeks pregnant, they start taking things very seriously and very differently. Immediately I was sent up, not to the emergency room, but to the emergency obstetrics. So I was basically sent up to the labor and delivery ward into their emergency suites, where I saw the overseeing doctor, and he informed me that my blood pressure was so high that I should be having a seizure or something. He asked me if I'd had a seizure, and I said no. I said I have a wicked headache, and I'm kind of nauseous. And he was like, okay, did you intend to deliver at 37 weeks? And I was like, no. And he said, well, you're going to deliver now. So I was like, really? And he's like, yes. Because it was something ridiculous, like 125 over 148. I was like, they wouldn't let me get up to pee. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I got to pee. And she's like, I got yelled at by a nurse for getting up to pee, because she's like, you could have had a seizure going to the washroom. I was like, oh. I just had to pee. I am just, I guess, far too independent. So they decided to induce me. They started me on magnesium and a drug that starts with a C that's not Pitocin. I got Pitocin later on. So they started me with the drug that starts with a C that's supposed to, you know, get your cervix all ready. And I got that for 12 hours. So this is all happening on the 1st. And the 1st and the 2nd. So I got 12 hours of this C drug, and then they decided to add Pitocin in. They gave me Pitocin, and then I got, it wasn't a Foley bulb, it was something similar that has a different name, but the Foley bulb is just one bulb, and this one is a double bulb to soften the cervix. And so I had that, and they gave that to me, and that worked. And then, so the magnesium they gave me, which was to help with the blood pressure lowering, also affected the baby. At the same time, they were monitoring me and everything. And so it made me feel really like I've been high in my life, but it was like being high but without any of the fun. And I slept a lot. And I figured the only advice I had been given by a lot of people was sleep when you can, because you're not going to get to afterwards. So I just was like, okay, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. I slept a lot, and they wouldn't let me eat in case I had to have a cesarean section. So at one point, I wasn't even allowed water, and I was like, this is not good. Because I was so dry and thirsty, like I was like, can someone just give me some water? And then after the Pitocin, after the bulb, and everything started to like progress naturally, it was starting to happen, you know, there was dilation, all things were going good, there was contractions being recorded. They let me have some food. They were like, now just so you know, if this gets stalled, you're going to have to go in and have a C-section. So this is the last thing you're going to eat, pretty much until your kid's born. And that was on the 3rd. I was like, okay, whatever. And I ate a shit ton, and I drank a shit ton, and then I proceeded to go back to sleep. And I was woken up by a doctor, and I did not like her. And she was like, I'm going to break your water, because you're far enough along. And I was like, okay. And she did, and I was like, ooh, that feels fucked up. So, and then at that point, my blood pressure had gone down enough that I was allowed to pee by myself, but I had to unhook from everything and like walk in and then hook back up, and like, because I had a blood pressure monitor and oxygen they had me like, yeah, no. So then she goes, well, I'm gonna stick a monitor in through the cervix onto the baby's head to do the heart rate and the contractions, because they were doing it from the outside, but he kept moving around so much that they couldn't keep track of him. He just kept moving. Like, they'd get one spot, I'd move, he'd move, and they'd be gone. And, or he'd just move, and it would be gone. And they were always, like, it was always going off that he was no longer on the monitor. And it was because he's a squiggle. He's a squiggle bug. I call him my squirm worm. So then she broke my water. I was coming back and forth, and then she decided to put this electrode thing in, and when she did that, he was pressed up against my spine, so it somehow created an electric jolt to my spine, which I thought was going to kill me. Like, it ran up my spine, into my arms, down my legs. I felt paralyzed almost. It was the most painful thing. It was like an electric shock to my whole body. And at that point, I was half out of it, and I turned to my husband and I said, was that a contraction? Like, I thought it was a contraction because I was starting to get into transitional labor, and the contractions hadn't been even remotely noticeable to me up to this point. Like, they were telling me I was having them. And I was like, if that's a contraction, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. And I said, I wanted the nitrous. So this doctor, who is not my doctor, who was on call at the time, said that she never used nitrous. She wasn't very comfortable with me using nitrous. She was trying to get me to have an epidural, and I really didn't want an epidural because I've had a spinal leak, and I had told everybody that. And after she did this, and I had such a negative reaction, I said, whatever, just give me the damn epidural. I can't do this for a night. Like, if it's gonna be this bad, I can't. And so she was like, okay, awesome. Got the epidural. And then afterwards she goes, by the way, that wasn't a contraction. Subsequently, if we do decide to have another child, which I don't know that we will, given how many complications we had, I would have to discuss that. I will have to discuss that with my doctor and see if that's even a possibility. But I would not get the epidural because that was the reason I got one, and she turned around and was like, nope. And I was like, oh, you. And I said to my husband at that point, I'm not delivering until she's off the floor. I swear I will hold this baby in because I do not want her to deliver my child. Because she was such a useless human being. Because she wasn't letting me make any of my own decisions, and I was like, no, you don't understand. And she was like, nah, meh. And so I got the epidural. It worked. I felt nothing. I could have probably still walked, but I just was like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep. And I slept through the night, and I would wake up and I would call the nurses to help me change because I was leaking things. And they put you on a puppy pad, FYI. It's like a human puppy pad. So they would change the puppy pad, they would give me a new gown, and then I would like go back to sleep, and then they would rotate me from side to side because my hips were really bugging me for some reason. But I couldn't lay flat on my back without pain. So it was a schmozzle. And but on the sides I was fine. I had contractions all night. I'd wake up occasionally with them and just kind of breathe through them and go back to sleep. My husband was sleeping on the little pull-out thing. And we just slept through the night like that. And waking up intermittently. Then the changeover happened at 9 a.m. That's when doctors would change over. I don't know if it's the same for every hospital, but that's when the doctors changed over. So my doctor was on call, was on the floor doctor the next day, and she came in to check me out. Or no, she wasn't the on the floor doctor. Because I had a stress test appointment with her that day that I missed because I was giving birth. And so she came in at 9 to check everything out and do the rounds. And she came in, she goes, okay, we might need to do something else because your contractions are pretty steady, but they're not like picking up or anything. They're just staying there and we're not sure what's up, but can I examine you? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so she does, and I'm like, I'm half asleep, like they woke me up, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she like examines me, she goes, oh, you're over 10. We're having a baby right now. And I was like, oh, can someone wake my husband up, please? Literally had to ask someone to wake my husband up. Now, his parents had driven up, so they were at their hotel, so he called them. And my mother was en route because she had planned to be here for the actual birth, but it was so early she had no plans, so she had been like spent the previous day getting all the stuff ready, and she was traveling. She was in the Vancouver airport, and so the resident and a couple of nurses started the whole thing. So the doctor went off to go to change and get ready and stuff, and the resident was there, and they were like, okay, we're gonna get you started and then we'll call the doctor when you're ready. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never done this. Sure, let's do it. And then I apologized for the fact that I had not prepared down there, and they had a good laugh about it. I felt horrible because apparently I needed to, it's like one of those clean underwear moments where your mother always tells you to wear clean underwear. I was like, I'm sorry, I should have trimmed. It's not like up to snuff. I feel bad, you know, like I've let it go. And they were, no, it's fine. And so you do a pre-pushing thing. I don't know if everybody does it, but they were like, yeah, sure. Okay, so they told me what to do, which was push on every contraction. And since I was barely feeling them, I was like, okay, I think that's a contraction. They're like, yep. I'm like, eh. And that took about 2 or 3 minutes. And they were like, oh, okay. Someone get the doctor. So the doctor comes in, and they trade off. The resident and the doctor trade off. And 3 pushes later, I had a baby crying on my chest, and I had my mom on the phone watching me. I had my friend Lily on another phone talking to me. I had everybody like saying hi. I have my husband cutting the cord. I have a baby that's full of goop, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I was so out of it. And then as they're like wiping him down and stuff, I'm like, do I need to push to get the placenta out? And she said, nope, it's out, you're good. I was like, okay. And so I snuggled with him for a bit. They put him in the incubating thingy to wipe him off and do all the measurements and take the blood and blah, blah, blah. And so we hung out, and he chilled, and he tried to breastfeed. He didn't do a really good job. And then it was basically the first afternoon, they said he's jaundiced. I have O positive blood, and I didn't know that, and because of that and the fact that my husband has A blood, my son was born with, I think it's A or negative or something like that, and so he has something called Coombs disease, which means that my blood passed through the placenta, which is completely normal, and it started to fight with his blood, and he ended up being very jaundiced. So they brought the lights into the room to try and help, but that wasn't helping enough. He needed more intensive care. His blood sugar was dropping. He wasn't sucking. He wasn't eating. And that was due to the 3 days of magnesium we had had prior to his arrival on the 4th. And so he was taken to the NICU. He was put under the lights. They had to get an IV in him. He was very hard to get an IV into. We almost had to go to Tacoma because they were thinking they might have to do an umbilical IV, but they did not have to. Thankfully, the head nurse was able to get the line in. He would eat passively, but not very well. So they put a tube in his nose and fed him that way. And it took 16 days of very hard and steady work between us and the nurses to get him to actually eat. And it had to do with the fact that he was born with a very high palate and a very active gag reflex. So he had to have a very special nipple that had a very slow flow, and we had to take it very slow. And he also had really bad jaundice for the first 5 days, and there's nothing we could do. They took his blood all the time, and it sucked to watch. Actually, I had no problem with the taking of the blood or the giving of shots. It was putting the tube in the nose. He pulled it out several times. He was born 6 pounds 12 ounces. He dropped down to 5 pounds, and that was really serious. But he's exceeded his weights now, and he's eating like a champ. We're all good. But the 16 days after his birth, when he was in the NICU, where I was just pumping every 3 hours to try and feed because he couldn't handle the flow from my breasts. It was too strong for him. It would startle him, and then it would choke him. So I had to pump and then feed it either through a syringe or into the tube. And then because I have the brain issue where I had the brain surgery, the pituitary surgery, my milk didn't come in fully. It will never come in fully. There was no letdown. I don't have a letdown, so I don't produce enough for him. So he gets like 20 mils off of me, and then everything else he gets through formula, which is what you have to do. Thank God for formula, right? And it was just really, really rough. It was really rough. We stayed at the hospital. They actually had boarding rooms 4 people. So my mom came and stayed at the house and took care of the pets, and then my husband rotated between the hospital and the house, and I stayed at the hospital and did not sleep for 16 days. I think I was there every 3 hours. I slept through a couple of feedings and I felt horrible, even though the nurses told me, just, you don't have to worry about it right now. Like, we're here, we're gonna feed him either way, so take a nap. And I was nope, was not having it. And it was about 5 days before I could hold him, which was really hard. And even then, like, on the 3rd day, I was allowed to hold him if he was, like, wrapped with the lily pad kind of thing that they put them on that has the lights. But we couldn't do skin to skin yet because he wasn't allowed to be out of the light. So it was about 5 days before I could actually, like, hold him and feed him. And it was just really rough. It was a really rough time. But, you know, persistence, the speech and lactation therapists, the speech therapist, and one of the head nurses. The head nurses kept rotating. I know there's a different, like, resident nurse, or no, is a professional nurse? No. The high nurse who oversees all the other nurses. One figured out what was happening with the sucking issue, and then we tried a crap ton of different nipples, and we actually found one that worked, which happened to be one of the harder ones to get, which was the Ultra Preemie for Dr. Brown, with the anti-colic and everything. And once we started him on that, he actually started to eat, and then we built off of that, and we're finally able to bring him home. But it took a long time because you have to have the tube out of the nose. He has to have the tube out of the nose, eat all of his food, and gain weight and hold the weight. And it was such a struggle. And of course, you're in the NICU, so you're watching all these other babies have issues too, and it's just heartbreaking and hard. But there were some amazing nurses who made it very livable, and I started making hats for the NICU nursery while I was there, out of the Pound of Love, just to keep myself sane. So a bunch of kids running around with those. And yeah, then we got to bring him home, and ever since we brought him home, it's been easy peasy. I mean, he's gotten his crankiness on occasionally, and he's had some rough goes with diarrhea. But all in all, the delivery was easy. The whole lead up was easy. Transitional labor sucked. I tried to break my husband's fingers, and the NICU sucked. It was as good as they could make it. And having him home, it's been wonderful. So that is the story of how my son came to be. And yeah, there you have it. I will be uploading this as soon as I can. I hope everyone is well, and I'm gonna try and record more often. Okay, bye guys.